Welcome back to BSA Talks. Today we're going to be talking about the other side of hiring, which is contractors, people who are hired for a specific task or set of tasks, which is in some ways the same, in some ways very, very different from hiring employees.
So how is hiring a contractor different than hiring an employee?
First of all, they're easier to get rid of. And that's quite honestly true. You don't have to pay them as many benefits and so on. On the other hand, the law keeps you from having them for extremely long periods of time. So there are trade-offs either way. What I have done with hiring contractors, and I generally don't like hiring contractors because I want people to be members of the team. I want them to have stock options. Every member of every employee of mine always has had stock options in the company. And of course, contractors don't get those, or generally don't get those. I will hire a contractor because he or she has the specific knowledge in a particular field that I need, and a specific set of abilities. So, for example, if I have a program that is written in Python and I need to be put into Fortran because the government's buying it, I'll hire somebody that has that skill. And then when it's over with, they're gone, unless I have another contract for them like that. With the technology side, I may very well hire somebody with a very specific skill, like, for example, long short-term memory neural nets, to pick something that we've done. It's a very small field, or was when we were doing it. It has not a lot of people who do that, and they generally are not going to be hired. They're going to be available as contractors because they get paid more. I mean, contractors are paid more than employees per hour. But on the other hand, you don't have any benefits. You have to pay.
Yeah. So the long story is you should hire a contractor if you need something done, but you don't need them for a long time.
Correct.
It's only if it's short term.
Correct.
So now that we've okay, well, my company needs someone short term, not for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
How do I go on about finding a contractor that's right for me? Because there's so many contractors out there.
And the answer is, at this point, it transitions to being virtually identical to what you do for an employee. You are looking for people that have good references, that you can follow the references. And in this case, you're dealing with a company they have no control over. In other words, a company that they worked for. So they were just like you, just like you're hiring them for a hired gun. So they are much less likely to be emotionally tied to people that are there, which means you're likely to get a more honest honest answer. And so you're going to go to the places they've worked. You're going to ask them for a list of places they've worked and a list of contacts of those places. You're going to play the same game of getting behind the screening, but it's less likely to be needed, but you're still going to do it. And you're going to ask how well they did and what the projects were. And you're going to ask them what the projects were too, to make sure that there's a correspondence between what the company thinks they were doing and what they were actually doing.
So the question is now that they're contractors, right? Do you think it would be maybe against the company that they're currently working for them to work for another company? Like maybe their company wouldn't like that. They're saying
usually contractors work for one company, although some have worked for more than. I've had ones that work for more than one. If the task is a full-time task, I only hire them for me, and they can't be working for anybody else.
Yeah.
But generally, the people they're working for will finish up. That finishes up. I'll get somebody in there say, I can't come in this month, but I can come in next month because I'm finished with the contract. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
And that's the norm on that. I very, very rarely have had somebody that's working on more than one contract. And those are where the task I have is too small to be full-time.
Yeah. And should you pay contractors hourly or per task done?
It depends on how they bill, of course, and because you're in that sense you're a slave to them. But in general, there is a contract rate either per hour or for a particular task, and it's difficult because you're hiring somebody that you don't have the expertise on. It's very difficult to estimate the actual amount of time it will take to accomplish something, which is why I tend to hire people just for by the hour. I mean, or by the month or whatever it is.
Yeah. So is it better to pay them? Because my caveat is, if you pay people hourly, what if they're like, well, it's taking me 50 hours a week to do this, but in reality, it's taking them 20.
Well, with a contractor, that's always going to be the case. Yeah. But the question is not whether or not they are working all those hours, although you'd prefer that they be, but whether they're giving you value for your money, because that's what counts. Are you getting the value you needed from your money? Are you getting more value than you get if you hire an employee for that and then had to figure out what to do with them when the project was over? That's the important question to ask. Of course, you want to know that somebody's working for you and they're not goofing off half the time. But you have to get to, like anything, you have to judge the person's ethics in interviews. We have contractors interviewed by just as many people as interview employees. So hiring contractors is both the same and different from hiring employees. It's the same in that you want to screen them for ethics, for ability, for experience. It's different in the sense that you're going to, one, pay them more, and two, per hour or per whatever, you're going to pay them more. That's number one. And number two is you can get rid of them much more easily, or you get rid of them automatically because it's the end of the project.
Yeah. So what if I hired, let's say I followed all the steps. I mean, if you guys haven't already watched the video on how to hire people, you're going to need to watch it to understand what we were talking about when we say hiring a contractor, because it's the same thing. Right? When you hire a person, it's really similar to hiring a contractor. The only difference from what I understand is that when you hire a contractor, it is just for a limited time where it's
or a limited project.
Or a limited project. Right. When you hire an employee, it's for a long time and they're yours to keep for years to make sure that they're part of the family, right, and part of your team.
Right. I mean, when I have hired contractors, I've generally had them for a year or less.
Okay.
When I have hired employees, I often have them for 20 years or more.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very substantial difference.
Yes.
And therefore, the ability to do a specific task is important for the contractor. The ability to do any task you throw at them is important for an employee.
Yeah. Now, what if I hired a contractor and they are not good?
You tell them you show them the door, and that's the nice thing about a contractor, at least, is you can get rid of them if they're not doing the work that you assigned.
Do you have to pay them if they?
You have to pay them up to the time that they've worked for you. Yes, the law requires that, but you don't have to pay them a day longer.
Yeah,
and that's the nice thing about it.
So if I pay them monthly, right, and they come at the end of the month, they're like, "Hey, I worked 72 hours this month," but they literally only wrote a piece of code that is 20% of what they were supposed to get done.
Well, you have a choice. You can pay them what they're asking for knowing you're being cheated, or you can go to court and pay a lot more money to lawyers. The answer is almost always just get rid of them and pay them what they've worked, what they claim to have worked.
Yeah, so always pay them what they claim they're worth.
Not always. Yeah. If it's pretty egregious or if there's anything dishonest about it, that's a different subject. And that's of course obviously important, and I have occasionally, although rarely, run into that with either employees or contractors. But when it happens, you have to be absolute and get rid of them, and no matter what, you just fire them.
Yeah.
Employee or contractor. The thing is, you normally will know. It's really black and white between the honest ones and the dishonest ones, and you'll figure out the dishonest ones very quickly. But so usually will the people who have worked with them before, and while they won't tell you because they're afraid of being sued, there's ways you express it that there's ways. We who interview people know how to ask the questions that get the honest answer back without exposing the people who are asking into the lawsuits. Yeah. Sorry about that, folks, but that's the way it works.
So how does that work?
You might say, for example, would you hire this person again? And the answer they would give would be, oh, absolutely. Well, that tells you something. Another one would be, we found them perfectly satisfactory for what they did. That would be a code for, don't touch this person with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
And once in a long while, you'll get a hell no.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's kind of understanding those little words between that.
But it's not difficult to understand because everybody does the same thing. And so we know how to talk. So you learn how to talk to previous employers.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's great. Now I know how to hire contractors and how to hire employees. So the next video will be, how do I fire people?
Yeah, now that you've screwed up, how do you get rid of the people?
Yes. All right. Awesome. Let's go to the next one.
Thank you.